welcome to our noon edition of Arirang News. Here are the stories making the headlines at this hour. The new president of the Korea Medical Association has vowed to form a consultative body for talks with the government. This has not been welcomed by the medical community, though, which remains adamant in its walkout from posts and halting of outpatient treatment in protest of the government's persistence to expand med school slots from next year. The Federal Reserve keeps its benchmark interest rate steady for the sixth time in a row. Fed Chair Jerome Powell did not know, though, it was unlikely that the central bank would hike rates again. Inflation in South Korea is still high, but is not rising as quickly as before. Consumer prices increased by 2.9% on year in April, which was the first time in 3 months that the figure was below the 3% mark. South Korea's largest doctors group, the Korean Medical Association, launched its new leadership amid ongoing conflict between the government and the medical community. The new head vowed to form a consultative body for talks with the government, but not everyone in the medical community seems to be on board. Choi Soo-young starts us off.
The Korean Medical Association is now under the leadership of the new president, Im Hyun-taek. In a Facebook post on Wednesday, the new head said he will make all-out efforts to untie a knot to alleviate the concerns from the medical community, patients and the public. Im unveiled plans to form a consultative body consisting of medical students, professors and doctors intended to serve as a one-on-one dialogue platform with the government. However, not everyone seems to be happy with Im's plans. Calling Im's actions arbitrary, the head of the Korean Intern Residents Association, Park Dan, claimed that Im had not discussed the plans with medical students before making the announcement. Meanwhile, the government once again emphasized its determination to push ahead with the reform of the medical system and urged the medical community to engage in dialogue.
Please think seriously about what the people and patients truly want, and what is needed to build a sustainable medical system in the future, and return to dialogue.
Doctors have rejected the government's call for talks amid protests over the government's plan to boost medical school quota. The prolonged walkout of residents has disrupted the country's medical service, with medical professors at Seoul's so-called Big Five hospitals recently confirming that they will take 1 day off per week due to fatigue. Choi Soo-young, Arirang News.
The Federal Reserve keeps its benchmark interest rate steady for the sixth session in a row, citing a struggle to bring inflation down, while the Fed Chair Jerome Powell downplayed prospect of rate hikes this year. Our correspondent Moon Hae-ryun reports.
The U.S. Central Bank froze interest rates for the sixth consecutive time as inflation continues to persist. Following the latest Federal Open Market Committee meeting on Wednesday, benchmark interest rates in the U.S. remain in the 5.25% and 5.5% range. This latest decision comes as recent data show that the Consumer Price Index jumped by 3.5% in March compared to the same month the year before, prompting Fed officials to keep rates high. The Fed's preferred core inflation gauge in the same month, the Personal Consumption Expenditures Price Index, excluding food and energy, also rose by 2.8% on year. With stalled progress towards its target goal of bringing inflation down, it's increasingly likely that the central bank will maintain its restrictive monetary policy as it seeks greater confidence that inflation is coming down.
But inflation is still too high. Further progress in bringing it down is not assured, and the path forward is uncertain. We are fully committed to returning inflation to our 2% goal.
But the Fed also ruled out the possibility of a rate hike in the next meeting in June, with a resilient U.S. job market which saw an average of 276,000 payroll job gains per month in the first quarter of the year and low unemployment rates. Following the Bank of Korea's decision last month to maintain its benchmark interest rate, the rate gap between the two countries remains at its highest ever at 2 percentage points. South Korea's Consumer Price Index for April was up by 2.9% on year, dropping to the 2% range for the first time in 3 months. With inflation still above the BOK's target and the South Korean won still fluctuating against the greenback amid tensions in the Middle East, pundits predict that the country's central bank will also freeze its rates at the monetary policy meeting taking place on the 23rd of this month. At a macroeconomic meeting headed by the country's finance minister on Thursday, related agencies pledged to work closely together in this time of economic uncertainties. 문혜련, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, consumer prices in Korea slowed in April with an increase of 2.9% on year, dropping below 3% for the first time since January. But fruit prices soared in the same month. Park Gon-woo tells us more.
Inflation in South Korea rose once again in April, but at a slower pace than in the past few months. According to data released by Statistics Korea on Thursday, the country's consumer price index, a key gauge of inflation, saw an on-year jump of 2.9%. That was the first time since January that the index dropped below 3%, after consumer prices saw on-year increases of 3.1% in February and March. Core inflation, excluding volatile food and energy prices, rose 2.3% on year. But prices for agricultural goods, livestock, and fishery products were up 10.6% on year in April, as farm produce soared by over 20% last month. Prices of apples and pears saw an on-year increase of 80.8% and 102.9% respectively in the same month. That was the biggest rise for pears since related data was first compiled in 1975. An official from Statistics Korea said that prices for those particular fruits may not drop significantly until apples and pears are in season later this year, despite recent financial support from the government to stabilize inflation. One expert spoke about the need for certain policies to deal with the issue.
So ideally, we would want to reduce tariffs for fruits and vegetables which are produced in Korea but can be imported from abroad, as well as fruits and vegetables which cannot be produced within the Korean borders.
He said policies for the medium to long term are also required.
The government should look into the distribution sector for fruits and vegetables. There always have been some concerns that Korean distribution sector for fruits and vegetables were not very efficient, and they may have elements of monopoly, which raises the cost of fruits and vegetables sold in Korea much above global prices.
In April, industrial products and services were also up by 2.2% each, while energy saw an increase of nearly 5%. And the Consumer Price Index for daily necessities, which measures the price of 144 daily essentials, saw a 3.5% increase compared to a year before. Park Gon-woo, Arirang News.
The South Korean military plans to speed up its drone acquisition to address North Korea's drone threats. On Thursday, the president's national security advisor Chang Ho-jin convened a meeting of the Defense Innovation Committee. Considering the changing battlefield environment, officials emphasized the need to adjust Seoul's strategy of acquiring high-performance drones over a long period of time to adding a higher volume of drones with adequate performance levels. The plan is to more than double the current volume of drones to strengthen the South's preparedness against the North. 5 North Korean drones flew across the border in December of 2022 and entered the no-fly zone around the presidential office in Seoul. Officials on Thursday also discussed ways to improve support for junior and mid-level officers to boost morale. The international community is looking for new measures to monitor sanctions against North Korea now that the United Nations panel of experts that has been doing the job has officially disbanded following Russia's veto on its renewal. Our foreign affairs correspondent Bae Eun-ji explains more.
15 United Nations member states, including South Korea, the U.S., and Japan, have stressed the need to find a new objective and independent analysis to monitor North Korea's sanctions violations. In a joint statement delivered by the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, the country said the elimination of a UN expert panel tasked with overseeing sanctions on the regime had made it harder for the UN to implement binding Security Council resolutions.
Given the imperative for all member states to comply with relevant Security Council resolutions and considering the expiration of the panel, we must now consider how to continue access to this kind of objective, independent analysis in order to address the DPRK's unlawful WMD and ballistic missile advancement.
She added the countries look forward to working with all UN member states on the matter. while urging the North to abandon its weapons of mass destruction and ballistic missile programs. As the international community looks to find a new mechanism to replace the panel, member states have reportedly decided to review a plan to establish an independent body, led by South Korea, the U.S., and Japan.
You have to do what you have to do, which is to inaugurate trilateral sanctions regime between the United States, South Korea, and Japan, and it's better than nothing. So I think it was a realistic option, and it all comes down to the matter of how three countries can really cooperate very closely to coordinate all these sanctions measures against North Korea.
Since its creation in 2009, the so-called panel of experts has played a key role in seeking to enforce UN Security Council resolutions against North Korea. The 8-member panel has produced related reports twice a year, keeping the international community informed about the regime's nuclear missile activities. But last month, Russia vetoed the annual renewal of the panel, bringing an end to 15 years of operation when the mandate expired on April 30th. Seoul Arirang News.
The U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom has named North Korea on its list of countries of particular concern for religious freedom violations. According to the Commission's 2024 annual report, North Korea joins the list, which includes China, Russia, Iran, and Afghanistan, for engaging in or tolerating particularly severe violations of the right to freedom of religion or belief. The report highlighted that religious freedom conditions in North Korea remained among the worst in the world last year, with harsh punishments for owning a Bible and practicing Christianity, including torture, forced labor, imprisonment, and even execution. The agency stressed the need to impose sanctions for such violations. Pyongyang was first added to the list in the year 2001. Over in Melbourne, the foreign and defense ministers of South Korea and Australia held talks on issues ranging from North Korea's threats to the possibility of South Korea partnering with AUKUS on sharing military technology. Our defense correspondent Choi Min-jung reports.
The foreign and defense ministers of South Korea and Australia sat down in Melbourne for the so-called 2+2 talks. Foreign Minister Cho Tae-yeol and Defense Minister Shin Won-sik met with their Australian counterparts, Richard Marles and Penny Wong, on Wednesday to deepen bilateral ties and cooperation on regional security. On the agenda was a commitment to address North Korea's evolving security threats.
We agreed to collaborate in blocking North Korea's access to funding for its illicit nuclear and missile development, and to thwart illegal activities, such as arms trading between Russia and North Korea.
So I think it is important for us to continue not only to express solidarity with the Republic of Korea in the face of this aggression, but also to call out Russia's behaviour as irresponsible and destabilising.
Also discussed in the meeting was the possibility of South Korea partnering with AUKUS Pillar 2. Pillar 2 of the defense deal between the US, UK, and Australia is a pact focus on sharing military technology across a range of areas, including hypersonic weapons.
We welcome that the AUKUS members are considering South Korea as a Pillar 2 partner. Korea's defense, science, and technology capabilities will contribute to the development of the AUKUS Pillar 2 as well as regional peace.
Korea is obviously a country with deeply impressive technology, where we do have shared values, where we have strategic alignment, and where we engage closely together.
The two sides also took note of their mutual participation in military exercises. Shin said the countries reaffirmed their commitment to continuing joint exercises and further elevating the level of cooperation between their armed forces. Additionally, the countries agreed to continue enhancing mutual and beneficial partnerships in the defense industry. This comes as a South Korean company was selected to provide Australia's next-generation infantry fighting vehicle project, valued at $250 million. The day wrapped up with the ministers releasing a joint statement based on the outcome of their meeting. The previous 2+2 meeting was held in Seoul in 2021. Besides the U.S., Australia is the only other country that South Korea holds such regular talks with. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
South Korea's two main political parties are set to address the revised Itaewon special bill during Thursday's plenary session. Both parties on Wednesday agreed to add revisions to a special bill on a new investigation into the 2022 Itaewon crowd crush disaster. The chief deputy floor leaders of the ruling People Power Party and the main opposition Democratic Party held a joint press conference on Wednesday, where the agreement on forming a revision committee, as well as its operational period and investigation method, was announced. The special bill was passed during a plenary session of the opposition-controlled assembly in January, but was vetoed by President Yoon Suk-yeol later that month. The presidential office welcomed the agreement on Wednesday, calling it a tangible outcome of cooperation between the parties, which began with the recent meeting between President Yoon and main opposition leader Lee Jae-myung on Monday. Physical clashes at universities in the United States between pro-Palestinian protesters and counter-demonstrators have led to police intervention and canceled classes. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken met Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Wednesday, where they shared their differing views on the looming Israeli offensive in Rafah. Lee Seung-jae with the details.
The wave of pro-Palestinian protests across U.S. colleges has become more violent, with reports of clashes between pro-Palestinian protesters and counter-demonstrators. Over at Columbia University, the heart of the East Coast protests, over 100 protesters were arrested late Tuesday night when police moved in on those occupying Hamilton Hall and an encampment on a campus lawn. Those arrested inside the academic building will be charged with third-degree burglary, criminal mischief, and trespassing, while those participating in protests in the encampment will be charged with trespassing and disorderly conduct. On the West Coast at UCLA, a violent clash between pro-Palestinian protesters and counter-protesters has led to police intervention. This has also prompted the university to cancel all classes for Wednesday. The White House on Wednesday responded to the growing tensions at universities across the nation. White House spokesperson Karine Jean-Pierre stressed that Americans have the right to protest peacefully within the law, but added that a small number of students are causing the chaos. The spokesperson also said that President Joe Biden is scheduled to give a speech on the topic of anti-Semitism at a museum honoring Holocaust victims next week. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met on Wednesday to share their views on Israel's looming offensive in Rafah. Blinken reiterated Washington's stance that an operation in Rafah right now would diminish the chances of reaching a deal to release Israeli hostages, while also impacting U.S. efforts to promote normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia. However, the Israeli leader told the visiting U.S. secretary that he would not accept an end to the war in Gaza as part of a potential hostage deal, while stressing that an offensive in Rafah will go ahead as planned. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Now on the local front, the capital city's annual festival, Seoul Festa 2024, kicked off this Wednesday, and it will run for a total of 6 days. Our Iuni reports, and visitors can explore the city's diverse charms through a variety of engaging experiences.
Seoul Festa 2024 is here. Presented by the Seoul City Government, the third edition of the city's Spring Festival features experience events in popular locations such as Seoul Plaza, Gwanghwamun Square, and Myeongdong.
Until last year, Seoul Festa mostly featured concert-style programs centered around K-pop. This year, we've integrated a range of elements such as fashion, beauty, K-pop art, and more to create an exciting and diverse festival for everyone to enjoy, both locals and tourists.
Seoul Plaza kicks off the first day of the festival with a K-pop concert, while Gwanghwamun Square turned into a playground where visitors can experience the city's culture, fashion, beauty, cuisine, and more. At the food zone, visitors enjoyed Korea's street snacks and desserts.
It's really good, it's very savory, but we like Korean food.
At the culture zone, visitors can create their own Korean name.
They gave you a Korean name. It was for a fun purpose. Fun purpose. Yeah, it was really cool. It was really fun. Funny, so.
It was really, and they gave us like that name, Jinji Chung and
Sayo.
It was fun.
Many more artistic activities are stationed at the culture zone, such as writing Korean calligraphy and drawing Seoul City. and those with a competitive edge can play takji, one of Korea's traditional games. The game is played using folded paper squares. Players take turns flicking their takji to flip over those of their opponents. Another popular zone is focused on K-beauty. Here at the Beauty Zone, you can try out K-beauty styling for hair, makeup, and nails. Also, don't miss the chance to capture your Seoul Festa moments with a glamorous photo shoot. There are also K-pop challenges and tours of different spots in Seoul. This includes Korean barbecue parties in Noil Park with beautiful views of the Hangang River. The event runs until next Monday, with more details on the festival's official website. Lee Eun-hee, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at the latest news in the world now. We begin today with coverage of protests around the world to mark Labor Day. Workers and activists demonstrated in major cities around the globe on Wednesday for greater labor rights and concerns over the increase in cost of living. In France, some 200,000 protesters took to the streets in May Day rallies across the country. The marches in Paris saw violent clashes, with French police firing tear gas at protesters, while 12 officers were injured after a homemade explosive was set off. A total of 45 people were detained at the Paris march. In Turkey, police in Istanbul fired rubber bullets and tear gas at thousands who attempted to break through a barricade to reach Taksim Square in a symbolic defiance against a ban on protests in the public square. The Turkish Interior Minister said at least 210 people were detained. In Latin America, thousands of workers gathered in major cities such as Bogota, Buenos Aires, Lima, and Santiago, chanting demands for better labor rights and an improvement of domestic economic conditions. Large-scale May Day rallies took place in Asia, where thousands in Indonesia, the Philippines, Sri Lanka, Japan, and South Korea took to the streets on Wednesday. In Colombia, President Gustavo Petro said Wednesday that he will cut diplomatic ties with Israel over its actions in Gaza. Speaking at the annual International Workers' Day march, Colombian President Petro heavily criticized Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, saying that Colombia is breaking diplomatic ties due to what he described as a genocidal president. Petro added that Israel's actions have led to the times of genocide, adding that if Palestine dies, humanity dies. Colombia also requested to join South Africa's genocide case against Israel at the International Court of Justice. Heavy rains in Brazil this week have led to at least 8 deaths in the country's southern state of Rio Grande do Sul. That's according to the Brazilian Civil Defense Service on Wednesday, who said that 21 people were reported missing. Flooding and high river levels were seen across the state, and authorities reported that over 1,400 individuals were displaced. In the state government's report on hydrological conditions on Tuesday, it said that there is a risk of flooding across the entire state as continued heavy rain is expected in the coming days. It also warned of the possibility of flash floods and landslides in areas near river basins. In the Gaza Strip, charity World Central Kitchen resumed operations in the war-torn area a month after 7 of the organization's workers were killed in an Israeli airstrike. WCK said earlier this week it had almost 8 million meals in 276 trucks ready to enter through the Rafah crossing, while some trucks will be sent into Gaza via Jordan. Before the deaths of WCK personnel on April 1st, the charity had distributed 43 million meals in Gaza since the beginning of the war, which it says accounts for 62% of all international NGO aid in the region. World Central Kitchen has demanded an independent investigation into the attack. Israel has admitted breaches of military procedure, dismissed 2 senior officers, and reprimanded senior commanders over the strike. Kim Seong, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. Seesaw temperatures continue today, swinging from single digits to the mid-20s within a few hours. Do dress accordingly to avoid catching a cold. Southern regions are finally seeing some sunshine this afternoon with very strong UV rays. Have your sunglasses and a hat ready to protect yourself from very high UV rays today. With sunshine, southern regions notice highs jumping 1 to 6 degrees higher this afternoon. The capital area should be as warm as yesterday at 24 degrees here in the capital this afternoon. Daejeon tops out at 25, Daegu and Gwangju see highs of 24 degrees Celsius. Decent air quality is in store nationwide all day, but a dry advisory is in place for east of Seoul. Nationwide rain is in the forecast for Children's Day weekend, with rain forecast from Sunday afternoon continuing into next Tuesday. But that rain will put the brakes on summer-like temperatures. With that in mind, let's take a look at the international weather conditions.
That's all we have for you at this hour. We'll bring you more updates at the same time tomorrow.